like it's something people don't know about you. We're good to go.
Good.
All right. I don't see it on YouTube. Okay, it's going to be there now. Okay, sweet. So, hello everyone. Um, Today we have Craig Newmark here for an AMA, and you can't tell by his name, Craig Newmark is the founder of Craigslist. The site hosts classified ads that cover practically every category you can think of, including housing, job postings, items for sale, services, and personals. And what began as a simple newsletter is now one of the top 20 most popular websites in the entire United States. In recent years, he's devoted significant time and money into philanthropy, giving away over $100 million so far. So this is an AMA, Ask Me Anything. So any questions you have for Craig, you can ask in the YouTube live stream chat, and we'll read them in the Zoom. So while the questions start rolling in, since there is a bit of a delay between the Zoom and the YouTube, I'll just get the ball rolling. So Greg, what do you think has made Craigslist so dominant over the years? Because a lot of people say network effects, but then there were other companies that had a big network like MySpace, but also died. So what do you think made Craigslist really special?
Maybe it's simplicity and speed. Craigslist is highly functional. People can get the job done. The site doesn't get in the way. From another point of view, well, someone named Jessa Lingle wrote a book about Craigslist, calling it the People's Internet. She points out we're one of the few remaining ungentrified sites on the web, specifically that Craigslist is kind of like a neighborhood where everyone got along, where everyone helps each other out. And when developers came around with big bags of money, people said, we don't need it. There's a whole bunch of perspectives like that. Sometimes I say that Craigslist helps people put food on the table. Craigslist helps people find a table. Craigslist helps people find a roof under which to put the table. All these are different ways of saying the same thing, though.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's definitely Craigslist does everything with the table. It even sells you the table, exactly. So, a question from the YouTube live stream: what inspired you to start Craigslist?
Early '95, I realized that a lot of people had helped me out settling into San Francisco. I decided I should give back in some way. This was the very beginning of the .com industry, so I thought I'd start telling people about technology events, arts events, and hopefully events that combine arts and technology. I was committed to listening to people, though, and when people said, hey, how about job postings, things to sell, I said, sure. And for that matter, I saw an apartment shortage beginning around then. So I said, hey, would apartments make sense? And it just took off from there. It was just me the first 3 years.
Oh, gotcha. That's a long time to go without working with anybody. How did you say, oh, this will be something, instead of just saying, oh, I don't really want to put more time into this?
Briefly, that history is that at the end of '97, after hitting about 1 million page views per month, which was a lot then, people were asking to volunteer to help run the site. We tried it for a year, didn't work, and in '99 I had to make it into a real company, and I had to make at least one tough decision. VCs and bankers were telling me I should do the usual Silicon Valley thing. They'd throw huge amounts of money at me, but I decided, I learned in Sunday school to know when enough is enough, and so I figured I'd minimally monetize. Not an altruistic decision, just based on one lesson I learned in Sunday school.
Wow. Yeah, definitely one of the more unconventional decisions, but it's worked out. So that's great.
Yeah.
Talking about that, someone asked, how does the economic model of Craigslist work, since you didn't go the traditional route of ads from outside people?
The model is basically doing well by doing good, and by charging people who would otherwise be paying too much for less effective ads elsewhere. Somehow that's worked out pretty well. The history, again, is counterintuitive. because around the same time was hitting 1 million page views per month. This is the end of '97. Microsoft Sidewalk, a long defunct, um, a long defunct city site, they wanted to offer me, oh, maybe my wife just called me. They wanted to pay for banner ads, but I was doing well enough, you know, and back then I was doing contract software work. And then I was thinking, I really dislike banner ads. A lot of them were and remain kind of not smart. And so I decided to forget about it.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Who would you say is your idol?
I have a few in some ways. The major one is Leonard Cohen, the singer, poet, musician, whose work, whose music and poetry actually do guide me. I do have other inspirations like Linus Torvalds, who I've yet to meet, but in having created Linux, he is one, uh, and he's taken very little in the way of a reward. But the deal is Linux is the successor to Unix, and so the family of Unix and Linux is one. And I run Android on my phone, and Android is basically Linux. So he's won in a big way, and yet taken very little of the proceeds.
Yeah, and I believe Craigslist even has a forum section for Linux. But another question is, how does the what were losses incurred at the early stage of Craigslist?
Um, Craigslist was profitable as soon as it became a company. The deal is also at the end of '97 or thereabouts, people who were putting jobs on the site asked me if I would charge them to contribute to the viability of the site. So even before volunteers started helping out, I kind of had the idea that even that minimal payment system would suffice. That worked out pretty well. The people who suggested paying for job postings kind of saved things, because through '99, after making the Craigslist into a real company, they and some other folks helped me understand that as a manager, I suck, and that I should have someone else be manager. And I became a full-time customer service rep. And I actually held that role until maybe 6 years ago, when I realized two things. The company didn't need me, but I was beginning to do some philanthropy that actually meant something.
Right. Yeah, and that's a really, again, one of those other non-traditional paths that you took. And so related to that, do you think entrepreneurship or entrepreneurialism is something that's in your blood, or is it something that can be learned?
Uh, it's not at all in my blood, and I don't know how much I've learned it. I was smart enough to get something started, and I was not dumb in this. I was not dumb enough to get in the way of its success. I don't identify as an entrepreneur. I identify as a nerd in the most classic early 1950s sense. And I was just, yeah, in our industry, there is a history of people who are really good at starting something and then not good at following through. And I committed to not following in that unfortunate path.
Yeah, definitely a move that required big like knowledge and check of your ego. So that was really impressive. How do you turn a good idea or hackathon project into a profitable business, since many people who are watching are in the hackathon right now?
Um, I don't have good answers to that. I do know that the approach of if you build it, they will come is not really a good approach to business. You have to find out if you're fulfilling a real need, and if you have people in your team who can get attention and who can also help persuade the public that you've got something real that will actually do something useful. As a tech guy, I had the stereotypical prejudice against communications, against PR, and against audience development. And technology is much easier than audience development, another name for which is business development or marketing communications or any of those terms. Building technology for technologists is easy, but marketing it is hard.
Yeah, definitely. And so then, what is someone else asked? What is the thought process behind making tough business decisions? If you feel comfortable answering that.
Um, well, part of why I realized that I suck as a manager is because I don't have much talent for making really tough decisions. Maybe I could develop that now, but there are hard decisions like hiring and firing, and then figuring out really good legal and PR help. You do need all those things, particularly if you're successful. Because if you're successful, if you get traction, bad actors may go after your work, and you need to have enough legal and PR savvy to do something about that for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes you're not only protecting your company, but you're protecting your customers in all sorts of ways. And I know Craigslist has had to fight to protect the privacy of people and sometimes people's lives.
Wow. Yeah, no, definitely. So I know you talk about doing well by doing good, but if you would need to build your company from the ground up again, what values would you focus on?
But the only thing I know is to treat people like you want to be treated. That translates into good customer service. The environment has changed a lot, and I've seen companies who have had great success in part early by spamming people via Craigslist or elsewhere, and I can't really sanction that, but that ship has sailed. So I can only suggest, well, not compromising your ethics because that may come back to bite you in the long term.
Definitely. So could you talk a bit about how you got into what you're doing today?
Um, for a period of over 10 years, people have been asking me from the nonprofit world, how I managed to build community with the site. And then people also thought that perhaps one could make a modest but significant contribution to their efforts. And I started paying attention to a lot of things, try to better understand things. Most notably, let's say in the past 10, 15 years, I realized the importance of a trustworthy press in preserving American democracy. In high school history, what our teacher taught us, as I put it, is that a trustworthy press is the immune system of democracy. And in fact, I just, for other reasons, looked up the article where a guy documented me saying that. He was more impressed that I was funny in a deadpan way, which I liked better. But the idea is that over a period of 10 to 15 years, I realized that there were some areas where I could help smart people do a better job in areas they were supporting. For example, supporting veterans and their families, but in addition to what veterans were doing to help preserve American democracy and elections in a period of information warfare. By accident, I stumbled into areas including press ethics, countering disinformation, countering harassment, cybersecurity. To me, those all wrap together in information warfare. And I started gradually getting into that in 2006. In 2016, I realized that the immune system of democracy failed and that I needed to do something about that. And so I just went ahead and did that. And now I keep doing it. Very recently, I realized that for years, maybe forever, too many people went to bed hungry in the US. And I could avoid thinking about that while focusing on the need for everyone to share accurate information. But the late response to the pandemic, the delay of months, meant a lot of collateral economic damage. And as a result, now tens of millions more Americans are going to bed hungry. And that pisses me off. So within the last 6 weeks, I've committed $10 million to trying to address that. I've spent about $6 million of that working with the big food distribution networks, nonprofits, and now I'm working with the Bob Woodruff Foundation to figure out how to learn from what the foundation has done in terms of supporting vets and their families, and now getting a lot of food to them. Because it's really unfair that if someone went overseas and risked taking a bullet to protect me, that vet and their family should not go hungry.
No, that's definitely a super important issue. And we have a question in the chat following up on that. So how can high school and college students like us help combat fake news?
The first lesson is an ethical principle. If you see something that if you smell it as disinformation, don't repeat it. Because when you repeat disinformation, which is to say, when you repeat a lie, even if you then tell the truth, you may wind up reinforcing the lie. Beyond that, look at some of the groups doing good work countering disinformation, countering harassment. It's a long story. I talk about it on my site. The short form of it is craignewmark.org, but you could look at centers of countering attacks in our country, either they're cybersecurity attacks or informational attacks. For example, take a look at what the Stanford Internet Observatory is doing. Take a look at what the Shorenstein Center at the Harvard Kennedy School is doing. Take a look at what the Aspen Institute Digital Group is doing. There's a lot of people doing this, and they help protect the election in a big way. That was pretty impressive, but they're still protecting it because the battle is still being fought, and it's really scary. The guy who runs the cybersecurity infrastructure group in Homeland Security, Chris Krebs, deserves an immense amount of credit, but he's now being attacked by some very bad people.
Yeah, it really is a shame that it's like that. Hopefully, though, your contributions can help fix those kinds of problems. So what sorts of opportunities did you take advantage of in high school and college to help you succeed?
The answer is really that I didn't take advantage of the opportunities I had. I've made a lot of dumb mistakes, which did keep me on a good path. I was lucky in high school. We had an old IBM 1620 computer, and I learned Fortran 2 on that using punch cards. Now, if anyone listening to this looks up the IBM 1620 or Fortran 2 or punch cards, you may have very bad dreams. And I apologize in advance for that. In college, on the one hand, I took advantage of a program which allowed me to write my own curriculum, which was the first computer science curriculum in the undergrad level at that school. This was in the early 70s. I'm very, very old. But in general, I've blown opportunities in productive ways because they led me to the path I've taken. After school, frankly, at IBM in Boca Raton, Florida, I actually shared my first office with the guy who was part of the initial PC project. I shared an office with the guy who wrote the BIOS, and if I wasn't a jerk, maybe I could have joined that team, but I was a jerk and I didn't have the opportunity. So the lesson there is, don't be a jerk. In class, in grammar school and high school, I was the kind of guy who would show off my academic knowledge. I was the first to try to answer a question. That's suicidal social behavior. Don't do that. If you ever have kids, tell them not to do that. But because even when I worked at IBM, I would correct people pointlessly, sometimes embarrassing them. Don't do that. That's being a jerk.
Definitely a good lesson because it's really easy to fall into that trap and not even realize the effects you can have on
Yeah.
others.
If you're good at technology, in many contexts, you will know more than others, but you're not doing yourself any favor if you correct them in the wrong context.
Right, exactly.
Sometimes you just have to let it go forever.
Definitely some great advice. So another question, this time going back to Craigslist. How did you advertise your company, if at all, and make it so well known?
It was all word of mouth. Um, I remember at one point, and I think this probably was in '99, Craigslist took out 2 ads in HR magazines, relating to job postings. But aside from that, it's all word of mouth, and somehow that worked. Maybe it was very lucky because that way the company never grew faster than we could keep up with, let's say, bandwidth and web server demands. The idea is that to keep the site fast as well as simple. And I remember uh, distinctly when 14 kilobit modems were a big thing, and that we had to keep the site fast enough for people with very slow connections. And even now, that's a good design principle.
Yeah, actually, it's a great segue. Talking about design principles, someone asked, why are there no capital letters used in the Craigslist website?
That's a good observation. The reason is because I didn't want the C capitalized, because I wanted to de-emphasize the Craig and Craigslist. And people still call it with a capital C, but I made a decision to de-emphasize me. And I guess as a programmer, programmers, at least of a certain breed, we tend to de-emphasize capital letters. That's somehow a tradition that I don't know really how it started, but I fell into it, again, like 40 years ago.
Right. No, interesting. One of the lighter questions. So what, according to you, are the best qualities for a team to start any company?
Um, the let's say the counterintuitive stuff is that you have to have people who love testing, and most developers seem to not be terribly fond of testing. So you need at least one person who champions testing. You need someone who will champion customer service, and you need people who will, if they're not part of your team, well, either you need to have someone in-house or have good consultants in audience development or marketing development, business development, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter if you've built great software, you do really have to have someone who can persuade people to use it.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to the advertising question, how hard was it to expand your idea into the international market?
Um, I don't know because that was done in 2000 by the guy I made a CEO. That's Jim Buckmaster. So basically, he made it happen. I saw that well, that it worked well enough because we decided not to, I should say, Jim decided to not market the site overseas, and it's had some limited success. But Craigslist is primarily a US success story, secondarily, Canada. We do see well, let's see, from what I recall, the company has seen some success internationally, and anecdotally, I've heard that people who move to the US and then back or so on, or maybe expatriates, tend to use it, which may have the benefit of sending the message to people that here's a US site which is effective and useful and not all about money.
No, definitely. That's interesting. How it can just start like that. So next question. where do you think the internet will be in the next 10 years?
Um, I'm hoping, because people are starting to talk about how to make the web accountable. And making the web accountable has a lot to do with the optional use of verified identities, so that if you try to run scams or harass people, site operators may know who you are, even if regular site users may not know. That's a two-edged sword, because bad actors can try to go after whistleblowers or dissidents, or maybe people running away to a shelter. Uh, People smarter than me are looking into those kind of issues. So I think the web will become more accountable. I think we'll have more control over our personal data. And I have a feeling that the role of advertising um, will be much less than it is now. Um, I need to have a better look at what Tim Berners-Lee has started via Inrupt and the solid systems, which allow people to carry around a portfolio that's identity related, where an individual controls their own data. I've read some of the news articles, but they don't go into enough depth for me. But there may be something really big there.
Oh, it's definitely interesting. It would be cool because he was definitely right the first time when he started the internet. So, talking about safety, on Craigslist, how do you keep the buyer and the seller community safe so that the trust remains? These days, people, oh yeah, that's the question.
Well, Craigslist is a classified site, so the model in that sense uh, is that it's kind of like the classifieds in newspapers, with the exception that when you're communicating on the net, you are leaving behind forensic trace data, which people can look for and sometimes find and go after bad guys. Um, that's something that people don't realize terribly well, and the cops were a little slow to catch on to 20 years ago. On the
Okay.
other hand, nowadays you watch a modern police show or a spy show, and they talk about tracing IP addresses all the time.
Right, definitely. Next question. So, these days, people are really keen on getting funding. Do you think that funding is necessary for high school slash college students interested in starting a company?
Um, Probably yes, in that you have to pay for things like adequate server facilities. If you get any traction, you're going to be paying lawyers and PR people. Um, it's possible you might be able to start up something, and it's so compelling that it may get the attention of people. The problem everyone faces is that uh, lots of people on the net are competing for your attention, because your attention has a dollar value on it, and oh, to compete for that attention is really tough. I guess there are YouTube or TikTok or Instagram influencers, but I don't have a good grip on that kind of thing, because I'm kind of detached from the way humans are attracted to that.
Right. Gotcha. So when it came to Craigslist, I don't know, maybe you were the only one to have the idea, maybe many other people had the idea. So what do you think is the most important aspect of executing an idea?
Follow through. Lots of people have lots of good ideas. The challenge is to execute on the idea and follow through on the idea. In my first 3 years, that was generally writing my own code. For example, when something got more and more traction and was taking more of my time during the day, I would write some code, which took a lot of the burden of action from me. Typically, if something grew to take an hour per day, I could usually write some code so that it would take more like 5 minutes.
Hmm, definitely. That's impressive. So if we have a good idea and have fair market advantage, is it a good idea to go fast and use higher funding from investor or go slow and use lower funding?
Uh, I don't know. That's pretty situation dependent.
Mhm.
The hard part is not the technology part, but it's again persuading people that you have something worth doing right now. A lot of that has to do with communication. because I hear lots of good ideas in technology, but also in the nonprofit world, and people frequently have really good ideas and don't know how to articulate them. When I read about this Inrupt thing, I sense that there's something really good there, but um, communicating it might be the next challenge.
Yeah, and talking about technology, and you mentioned coding before. Do you still code?
No, I haven't coded since sometime around 2000 or maybe a little later, because the last bit of code I wrote was actually uh, for the Freedom Riders reunion, just a little sign up CGI. The deal, the Freedom Riders were a lot of the people in 1961 who helped to end segregation in the South. And as it turns out, one of the survivors lives or lived in Berkeley and just asked for a favor.
Wow, that's crazy. So long. So, how important are social skills to you in a workplace, and how can I get better social skills so I can become a better coworker?
I may not be the right person to suggest how you learn social skills. I may be the opposite of the right person doing that. The You do need a few people who do have good social skills and who know you. You need to ask them to tell you about your rough edges, and then even if your rough edges only sound logical to you, you do need to listen to them and to consider modifying your own behavior. That's good both in business and socially. Uh, if somebody had told me that in high school or college, I would have had what I understand people call more fun. On the other hand, I wouldn't have made the right mistakes. So there is that trade-off between fun and life.
Right. Yeah, no, talking about fun. During your college days, what kinds of projects did you make, if any?
I don't recall much in the way of projects except for classroom projects. In an AI class, I wrote a simple theorem prover. And I remember writing some simulation programs in a simulation class, in a class, two classes on compiler writing. I actually had to write a simple compiler and so on. In a way, the biggest project I ever did was directly from what I learned in school. In '82, I wrote a multitasking kernel for the PC, and the hard part was extending it so that we could write device drivers in Pascal. Pascal, if you're very old and you just recognize it as if you're very old, Pascal was the hot language in the late 70s, very early 80s. But by 1985, I was teaching myself C.
Wow, gotcha. So, do you think that a new useful site, but with a dead simple UI like Craigslist, could succeed if it began today, or do you feel like the bar has risen?
Um, I don't think the bar has risen in that good design, good simple design, is a forever kind of thing. People keep telling me, if they're trying to get through the day and put food on the table, whatever, people need simple, straightforward, and fast. And I have a feeling that may be a distinguishing design principle in a lot of ways. I don't think about that much because, let's say, the current design principle that I think of, and this is a bit of a tangent, but this has to do with my hunger initiative. Right for decades, I've wondered, is there enough food to go around for everyone? And even with the great increase of hunger in this country, I've asked people who seem to be knowledgeable, and they say there's enough food to go around for everyone, but getting it to people is hard. So the tech challenge that I'm curious about and may have to raise very publicly is, how do you get food, the excess food from farms and markets and restaurants? How do you get that to the people who need it And my gut tells me there's a solution that I'm not smart enough to figure out, but I can enlist people, hopefully, that'll solve the problem.
Yeah. Another question. Can you talk about actually a little bit more about what you're doing in the Hunger Initiative?
Well, so far, this is a project, a very recent one. It's a moving target. So far, the first phase is to identify 6 of the smartest food distribution networks for nonprofit purposes and give them substantial grants. That includes the World Central Kitchen, DC Central Kitchen, Feed America, God's Lovely Deliver in New York, and start to get them at least going and thinking about this and getting them to work together, because in a way they do compete for funding. Second part, I've been working with Bob Woodruff Foundation for years, and they have a network of networks that helps out vets and families for whatever their needs are. The idea is that in any geography with a lot of vets and families, they've identified the nonprofit groups who are good at doing something. And then they've identified people who can coordinate that in that geography and get stuff done. That's much harder than you think, because there's over 40,000 groups, nonprofits, dedicated to helping vets and families, most of which are defunct or ineffective or running scams. So if, and that effort is in the process of being renamed, but the deal is if you can run a big network of networks across the country to help people, maybe a good food distribution network can evolve from that. That's the smartest thing I can think of. My gut tells me that's the beginning of a solution, but now is the time to execute. And my next planning meeting for that will either be late tomorrow or early Tuesday, because working with a guy who's thinking that through. He's a guy with like social skills, and I have a lot of my philanthropic approach is to find people who are good at stuff and then having them execute, because if they're good at stuff using social skills, then maybe I could be. Now it could be that someone's spouse is now coming in and looking at me surreptitiously. Ah, okay. Don't look at this. Okay. I should also tell her I think we'll be done in about 5 or so. Is that about right?
I'm gonna
Yeah.
go.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, I'm going out one more time.
Okay.
Awesome.
It's about it's getting close to dinner time here in New York. It's also darker than it should be, which is very disturbing.
Oh, I'm in New York too. It's awesome. So next question. Every other day, it seems like there's someone who's creating some two-sided marketplace app that connects, either buyers and sellers or riders and drivers. So what advice would you give to people trying to build these two-sided marketplaces?
Well, there's that good customer service thing. And again, listen to the people trying to use it, because the chances are pretty overwhelming. In the first or second or third try, you're not doing what they really need you to do, and they want to tell you what they need you to do. And if you listen to them, you'll have a better product, and you're also going to build relationships that will give you a chance at success. And I'm phrasing that pretty carefully. That will give you a chance for success. There are people all over the world who are competing on the internet, trying to do things that are creative, that may make a difference, and if they're lucky, may allow them to do well financially, maybe great financially. And I guess I've done great financially despite the minimal monetization philosophy, but I've already given away more than half my net worth. And over the years, I'll make more decisions. But right now, we are, American democracy. We have to make sure that we survive through the end of January. Then we have to start planning beyond that, but in other areas. I didn't think I'd be caught up in food security, but I am. And for about a year, I've thought that I have to help other people help solve areas like income inequality or mass incarceration. And I know who I can talk to. For example, the Brennan Center for Law at NYU, they helped help the election be run fairly. They also have a project involved in mass incarceration because too many people are in jail right now, and maybe I can help other people do the job. So again, my theme is that I'm not that smart, and I'm busy enough, but if I can find networks of people who are good at something and give resources away, they can do the job. The only conditions I have are that they get good at PR, that they get good at protecting themselves, because there are some people whose missions put them at serious risk. And finally, the heaviest burden I put on any group is to tolerate my sense of humor, because I know that I'm not as funny as I think I am. Nevertheless, I keep trying.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And let's see, maybe it's time for one or two last questions, depending on how long this one runs. How do you deal with your own personal values conflicting with business decisions if they do ever conflict?
Usually, I just make no business decisions which conflict with personal values. And I've been very lucky about that. I guess the closest is that my natural bias, my default, is to be totally transparent, and I can't do that. One reason is that, if you're successful in any manner, just the way life works is you're going to be signing a bunch of confidentiality agreements, non-disclosure agreements, so you can't talk about those things. Sometimes you're going to help people fight bad guys, and that's something you can't talk about, because unless you're really good at knowing what you can say and can't say, you don't want to spill the beans. So I guess transparency is a personal value, and I've had to learn the limits of that. I guess there's the third principle of that: do no harm. Sometimes there are unintended consequences to things that you can say, and maybe your expertise doesn't extend to knowing what those unintended consequences are, or maybe you just don't think them through. But sometimes you can say something which is very smart in some ways, very dumb in others, and you only know the dumb part of it when something bad happens.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I think that's about all the time that we have, but thank you so much, Greg, for taking time to do this. It was very helpful and great to hear your thoughts. You definitely have a big heart and are super humble. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. And now I better find out what Mrs. Newmark is up to.
Oh, yeah. All right. Enjoy dinner.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Right. Bye.